Pope Francis continues to recover from his multiple illnesses in the hospital in Rome. If one can parse the often vague reportage from the Vatican, the Holy Father seems to be improving, if only slightly, each day. Meanwhile, the business of the Vatican and the Pope continue despite the Holy Father's precarious health situation. Here with a report, senior Vatican correspondent for the National Catholic Register and co-founder of the College of Cardinals Report.com, Edward Pentin. Edward, thanks for being here. For the last several nights, Cardinals, including Cardinal Raymond Burke, Peter Turkson, Gerhard Mueller, and others have gathered in Rome to pray the rosary for Pope Francis's recovery. The most recent medical update from the Vatican stated that Pope Francis's condition has only slightly improved over the last few days. Today, he alternated high-flow oxygen therapy with a Ventamask. Given the complexity of his clinical condition, further days of clinical stability are required before a prognosis can be determined. In the morning, the Holy Father dedicated time to respiratory physiotherapy, alternating with the rest. In the afternoon, after another physiotherapy session, he spent time in prayer in the chapel of his private apartment on the 10th floor, where he received the Eucharist. Then he resumed his work activities. Now, Ed, the February 27th morning update simply stated the Pope slept well during the night and is now resting. What are you hearing, and what is the overall perception of the Vatican's communications regarding the Pope's health and recovery?
Yes, well, I think Raymond, he certainly does seem to be improving, and I think that's clear. And I think that the talk about physiotherapy sessions shows that he is recovering, and they're taking it to the next step. But I think generally, the people have been happy, at least like that I've spoken to, happy with the Vatican's statements, although some do say that even though it's a lot of detail in them, and more detail, in fact, than I think happened when John Paul II was hospitalized, not all of it is necessarily relevant, and there's still many unanswered questions. For example, we don't know what type of pneumonia it was that he had or still has, and what drugs they're using in particular to treat him. But on the whole, though, I think people have been quite impressed by the level of detail that we have received.
What do you make of the Pope's sister arriving in Rome? I'm seeing reports that this is the first time she's visited her brother as Pope. She just arrived in Rome, and I'm seeing reports, Ed, that Cardinals are also sort of flooding into Rome. Is that what you're seeing or hearing?
Yes, well, he has been receiving visitors. Of course, he received Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni just before he took a turn for the worse. And so he has been receiving visitors. He's been receiving visitors for most of this week. Cardinal Parolin has been to see him, the Deputy Secretary of State, Archbishop Pentin also. So he does seem to be well enough now to receive visitors, to continue working, which also shows that he's recovering, and perhaps he could be discharged at some point. But then the question is, how weak is he going to be? How much can he really fulfill his duties, all the duties as Pope, or will they be severely curtailed?
Yeah, and I want to talk about that in a moment. But what do you make of the nightly gathering of the Cardinals to pray the Rosary in St. Peter's this week? Does it underscore the seriousness of the Pope's condition despite these reports? I mean, I can't recall a nightly consistent prayer vigil like this since John Paul II took ill.
Right. Yes, it is. It is fairly unusual. It is unusual. But I think it's interesting that they have started. I think it started on Monday, and they've been praying every day. And a big group of cardinals, really, who are living in Rome. So it is quite significant, and I think it does show the seriousnness of it. Of course, it really responds to the turn for the worse that happened on Saturday, which was the Feast of the Chair of St. Peter, when he was, I think, had that respiratory crisis, and I think it stems from there. But it'd be interesting to see how long they keep praying, because of course, if he does improve, that'll probably stop.
As you can see here, Cardinal Raymond Burke was also at that rosary. He's been there every night. I was very impressed to see this, Ed, because it's no secret to our viewers or anybody else. The Pope fired him from his position at the Signatura, bounced him from his position at Malta, reduced his salary, threatened to throw him out of his apartment, and then decided to backtrack on that. And yet, there was Cardinal Burke. What does it say about his character? To me, it's a great lesson in charity.
Yes, I think that's what a lot of people are taking from that. And it's very much in character with Cardinal Burke. He is very much of that character. He is very charitable. He does turn the other cheek. He lives the gospel. So in that sense, yes, I think it's very much reflective of him, and as you say, all the things that have happened to him, really a kind of persecution in a
Yeah.
sense, which has led
Yeah.
to which gives greater strength really to how he's responded and how he's
Hmm.
reacted to this.
Yeah. Ed, I have to tell you, I've been reading these reports as you have and waiting for them to drop, the morning report, the afternoon report, or evening in your time. I have to say, I'm a little rattled by the consistent nightly rosary prayer vigil and now seeing the Pope's sister arrive in Rome. That to me is kind of counter-programming, if you will, what we're hearing in the official missives coming out of the Vatican press office. Should we be looking for those other extraneous signs besides what we're getting through the Vatican press apparatus?
Well, I think it's partly because the Gemelli Hospital where the Pope is, I think they're probably concerned that they're being especially cautious, I would say, just in case he does take a turn for a worse. So they don't want to jump the gun and say that he's getting much better when they're still very cautious. They really don't know whether he could take a turn for the worse. So that's my
Mhm.
impression, that they're being very cautious, very circumspect, because they don't want to make that mistake. Of course,
Mm.
they'd rather not have him, I expect, die in hospital if that's what's going to happen. And often popes have if they have taken a turn for the worse, or they usually end up uh, dying usually in the apostolic palace, so and not in hospital.
Yeah.
So that may
Mm.
be what will happen eventually. But
Mm.
yes, I think that's the concerns of the Gemelli, I think.
Yeah, well, I'm keeping my eyes on all of it. Look, I take it all in, and then you have to kind of sift through it and discern what you're being told from what you're seeing, and usually the truth emerges. I mean, we remember how John Paul II was serene, quietly resting until he wasn't any longer. And I mean, so we do have to take all of this with a grain of salt. Ed, throughout all of this, since entering the hospital on February 14th, Pope Francis has been at various times making appointments, directing public statements. For example, on February 22nd, the Holy See press office, and this has not gone reported very much, they said this morning Pope Francis experienced an asthma-like respiratory crisis of prolonged intensity, which required an administration of high-flow oxygen. Meanwhile, the Holy See press office bulletin reflected the following, same day: appointment of special envoy to the celebrations of the 1000th anniversary of the coronation of King Bolslaw Chobri. Resignation and appointment of Metropolitan Archbishop of Dakar, Senegal. Resignation and succession of Metropolitan Archbishop of Corrientes, Argentina. On and on. You see them all there on your screen. My question is this: that's quite a flurry of activity while the Pope is in hospital and having a major health crisis. Your thoughts?
Well, I think a lot of these appointments, a lot of these decisions have been taken a long time in advance. Certainly, the episcopal appointments, they're often taken months, weeks in advance, and they're only disclosed now. So I think that's part of the reason. I don't think these have been done necessarily while the Pope has been in hospital. So I think that's probably an explanation for a lot of that. But he is doing
Yeah.
work. But of course, we don't know what kind of work he's doing.
Right. Well, that's the point. They say he's resuming work, and we are seeing these, and look, another example, you had the press office health updates and the press office bulletin from Monday, this past Monday. And, they said, look, the Holy Father's clinical condition, despite its severity, has shown a slight improvement. In the evening, he called the parish priest of Gaza to express his paternal closeness. And that same day, the Vatican bulletin revealed 4 new episcopal appointments, 2 in Italy, 1 in Spain, another in Brazil. What are you hearing about the level of business being conducted? I mean, this seems to be going on at a rather brisk pace. And look, it's not just the episcopal appointments, Ed. It's surrogates to go to special events. It's announcements and statements. I mean, surely the Holy Father isn't doing all that on his own.
No, and he did receive, I said earlier, the visits from Cardinal Parolin and the Deputy Secretary of State, and so I'm sure there's definitely delegations going on and delegatory aspects of this. So he's not doing it all, and he's getting help.
And Ed, as you mentioned, we also should point out the Pope met with Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin, as you referenced, as well as influential Jesuit canonist Cardinal Gianfranco Ghirlanda. Could these visits account for some of that activity, that steady stream of announcements and appointments that we're seeing? And do you expect to see more in the way of appointments?
Possibly, but as I say, they were probably made a long time before, and if that's the case, there won't be many while he's been in hospital. But as you say, he has been receiving visitors. They denied that Cardinal Ghirlanda went to visit him, but then I've heard other things too, that perhaps there was some contact. So we don't know, but that's an interesting aspect, because Cardinal Ghirlanda is his top canonist, and there is talk of the Pope wanting to change aspects to the conclave, and so whether that's been part of it, we don't know. But yeah, he has been receiving quite a few visits, important visitors. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, this is going to be touch and go, is my guess. I mean, remember, John Paul II, who was a vigorous man until the Parkinson's, attacked his body in such vicious ways. Pope John Paul II was 84 when he died. Pope Francis is 88. And in John Paul II's case, he was in and out of the Gemelli until he finally went to the Apostolic Palace and they brought medical care there. Do you expect Pope Francis to be discharged from the hospital anytime soon, Ed? I know they're already talking of canceling, the Ash Wednesday appearances.
Yes, I mean, I remember when John Paul went in, and he was very poorly before he went in, and I think people realized that this was probably going to be his last few months. I don't think that seems to be the case with Pope Francis. He doesn't have, of course, Parkinson's, so it's not quite so serious then. And that John Paul was going in and out of hospital, as you say, for 2 months. And I think we could well see Pope Francis being discharged. As I said earlier, it's really interesting to see how strong he'll be once he is discharged. And somebody pointed out that perhaps he'll have to, carry an oxygen tank or something around with him as a precaution. But we don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see, though, whether he is discharged soon and how he copes with that, and what he can do.
Edward Pentin, we will leave it there. You can find Ed's The College of Cardinals report at collegeofcardinalsreport.com. Ed Pentin, thank you as always.
Thank you, Raymond.